Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
The old boat stood dead weight in the garage, and Liza was sitting thoughtfully in the Turkish way, in the front in a small wooden triangle toward the bow of the boat. The boat was made by Papa himself when he was still young, a long time ago. He used to take great care of it, painting it every spring with a new varnish, putting it up and fixing it. Liza used to come here to visit the boat when longing for her father overcame her as a child. She loved to sit like this on the very edge of the boat, and it seemed to her that she was not riding on the boat, but flying low over the water like an Indian goddess, sitting on an invisible flying mat, 5 years after her father had gone. And now there was nobody to take care of the old boat. Liza's husband is a jolly joker. Ethan has no interest in the boat. He's not interested in anything but beer and basketball. Is she so wrong about him? Years ago, trying to get her, the daughter of an academic, to like him, he took her to the theater for classical concerts, dressed up in costumes and listened to Wagner with her and her father. And then, when they were married, he listened for a while too, though Liza knew perfectly well that he didn't need it at all. Now he watched basketball downstairs and drank beer every night. No, Liza didn't mind at all. To each his own. But why did she have to pretend like that? Now she was disgusted by his pretense and wanted to leave so as not to see him, sprawled out in his favorite daddy's chair and put his feet on the low antique table, eating fish on the newspaper, throwing it right on the floor scales and drinking beer. Together with her friend Rob, who almost every weekend comes to their cottage from the city. Liza and went upstairs in the attic and painted there their still lifes, peonies, poppies, cornflowers in large hollow jugs or in lightweight clear bottles. Her friend Jenna, a classmate, also came to visit her from the city. They had been friends since childhood in first grade and knew everything about each other and shared Jenna's innermost and most intimate secrets. Liza was fragile, shy, and very painful as a child. Every now and then she missed school, falling down with another sore throat. Jenna is an athlete, tall, tough, and cocky, always able to stand up for herself. They were put at the same desk, and Jenna, seeing her dreamy neighbor doodling in her notebooks, admired her wholeheartedly. "Great. How do you do that?" "I do not know," shrugged Liza. "I just see it in my head. And I repeat, you're an artist," affirmatively said Jenna, and it was her statement that defined her future profession. She did indeed enroll after 9th grade in art school, and then at the famous Watercolor Academy. Now she was already a teacher herself at this academy. And Jenna was a successful coach in Master of Sports in athletics. So different. Nevertheless, they always found something to talk about. And they continued to be friends. Although, it would seem, what could they have in common? Jenna was the daughter of intelligent parents in a city apartment. Her mother even had a maid. Her father was a college academician, a respected man, and her mother was too. She was a well-known musician, played the piano, taught at the conservatory, and gave public lessons at home. Now gone, no mom, no dad. All that's left is one Liza and another Jenna, a loyal, trustworthy friend you can always count on. Not adapted to Liza in terms of life, she always helped out. Whether it was tickets or a big cleaning job at the dacha, Jenna organized it all and much more. Liza just couldn't do without Jenna and Ethan. At first, when they first started living together, I was terribly angry. And why is she always hanging around? Doesn't she have her own thing to do? "Why would you do that, Ethan?" Liza answered with a touch of reproach. "She's my friend. We're practically like sisters, you know? But I married you." Ethan continued to be indignant. "Not that sister of yours. Whenever I come home, she's right there, unashamedly lying on our bed. It's like coming out of the bathroom in your robe. I mistook her for you from behind the other day, sitting at the table in front of the mirror on your head in a bathrobe, a robe on her face mask. I couldn't make it out from the bright Jenna. I went closer, I wanted to hug her, and she just laughed. What honey? Mixed up a little. Anyway, whatever you want, but it all has to stop," Ethan went on. "I have no intention of having a threesome. And I hope you don't either." "What kind of nasty things?" Liza corrected herself squeamishly. I'm sure you misunderstood her. Jenna's just funny, she likes to joke around. You know how she's not happy at home. So what, you feel sorry for her? If she's here to pray. I know, Ethan said. Come on, just tell her to shut up, will you? But that was a long time ago. The first 2 years of their life together. Then Ethan got used to this state of affairs and didn't mind anymore. When Jenna fried pancakes in their kitchen or washed windows. Helping Lisa, suffering from vertigo. Having Jenna in her own home really wasn't sweet. She lived in a tiny 2-room marriage-type apartment with her half-paralyzed grandmother's mother and alcoholic father in the farthest and dustiest factory industrial neighborhood. Lisa and her whole family always felt very sorry for her and tried to help her. They would give her a dress or a blouse for the holidays. They would give her groceries when she was embarrassed. Suddenly, it seems inappropriate father, bringing tickets to various children's events, theaters, concerts, and arranging tickets to pioneer camps. Never forgot about his daughter's girlfriend and Jenna. With Lisa, we're everywhere together. As they grew older and their interests and studies separated them a bit, Lisa would go on planned trips with her Jenna to school, to training camps and competitions. But when they met after being apart, they couldn't get enough of talking. Now that Lisa and Ethan lived mostly at the cottage, Jenna lived in their city apartment, and she had a better break from her pesky relatives. And they feel good, looking after the living quarters. On weekends, if there was no competition or travel, she would come to them. Jenna wasn't married and didn't want to be. She spoke with a laugh. The good men were all taken a long time ago. You're close to lucky. You're always lucky. You're the lucky one. And people like me don't have to be. She laughed, trying to hide her sadness, and immediately rushed either to mop dishes or cook something tasty in the kitchen. I'll be like a pet in front of you. Jenna laughed. When did Lisa reassure her that she would find her destiny? Jenna, you're so sweet. Lisa hugged her, barely reaching her tall friend. You're like family to me. Do you want me to ask Ethan to introduce you to someone at his work? I didn't shake my head. Jenna, that's kind of silly. If fate throws you a date, then so be it. And if not, well, I'll lie to you. She laughed again about her friend's cheek. Do not be discouraged, close. As if this Lisa had been robbed of her destiny, not herself. Jenna was gone today. 2 days ago, she had left for another training camp to coach young athletes. And a few days later, Lisa herself was leaving for an internship in one of the West Coast cities in nature, as the artists said. Also to train children, drawing landscapes in a bright attic with stuffy and dust flew spiraling in the sunlight. Lisa suddenly felt so homesick. She got up from behind her easel and pulled the door ajar. From downstairs, she could still hear the muffled muttering of the television. But no one was yelling at all anymore. 3 o'clock. Apparently, the broadcast of the basketball game had already ended. And Ethan and Rob are just sitting around drinking beer, and the TV mumbles to itself. Lisa went downstairs to pour herself some tea and found that no one was in the spacious kitchen and living room anymore. She turned off the TV, put the kettle on, and went outside and saw an amazing picture near the garage. Her own husband and Rob had pulled Dad's boat out into the light and were busily treating it with something. Lisa smiled happily. How lovely. Perhaps I should have underestimated him. So what? So what about the beer? He could if he wanted to. Happy, she ran down the steps and past the flower beds of lushly blooming plants. Jenna did her best. Who else had? Walked to the garage. Ethan, are you fixing the boat? Yeah, the husband nodded. She's had enough of sitting in the garage gathering dust. How many times have you done that? Said you wanted to go for a ride. It's a lot of work, of course, but it's okay. When you get back from your internship, and Jenna's coming over to the pond, Rob won't mind either. Yeah, man, he elbowed his friend in the side. The guy smirked. Why not? Lisa sat down in a chaise lounge standing in the garden and sat happily, closing her eyes to doze off and watching the boys fiddling with the boat. How happy am I, after all? She thought. All of her bad moods due to her husband's non-reversible habits. His dislike of what constituted her interests faded away. Into that blue June sky through which white fluffy clouds crawled lazily. All people are different. Liza thought, Jenna and I aren't alike at all. And we've been friends most of our lives. Ethan has the right to live as he likes. What am I talking about? The important thing is that we love each other, and she made a promise to herself not to get annoyed over nothing, and not to demand too much from the people closest to her. Arriving home after practice, cheerful and a little tired with a burnt red-brown nose, Liza found that Jenna was ahead of her, and I was back a couple of days before you informed her friend, hugging the thin Liza tightly. Oh, let Liza laugh. The bones are cracking, you'll break them. The lightweight Jenna had already cooked for her arrival. A terrific dinner. Men, Ethan and Rob opened a bottle of light white wine for her and Jenna, while they themselves drank beer as usual. A sweet cognac for tea afterwards, though, said Ethan with a chuckle, pouring a bottle from his father's old stock. Liza wanted to be indignant. After all, they had agreed not to touch Daddy's bar unnecessarily. But then she pulled herself back, and today was just such an occasion. They waited, they tried, and she will make a showdown. Why open a collectible cognac? Low. That's what Daddy would have said. It's low and ugly. In the morning after breakfast, Ethan, Jenna, and Rob blindfolded her, solemnly took her to the pond. They said surprise. A smiling Liza guessed, of course, what surprise? But she kept it to herself. She played hard to get away with surprise and curiosity. But when she was twisted 3 times around her axis for laughs, the handkerchief was finally removed. Liza, not pretending, gasped. My God, what a miracle! On the pier stood a boat barely bobbing on the water, shining with new turquoise paint and the inscription on the side of the dark brown, sharp brightly marked. The glossy azure was flashing. Thank you. Thank you. She threw herself around Ethan's neck, then hugged her friend tightly and even kissed Rob's embarrassment-sick cheek again. Thank you guys. Wait, there's more. And Jenna solemnly handed her a large cardboard box. Is it just me, or is it someone's birthday today? Happy birthday, and slammed down a bottle of champagne. Oops, barely breathing with delight, Liza pulled a tiny kitten out of the box. God, Jenna. Her eyes filled with tears. How cute do you like it? Jenna perked up, asked Liza, pressed the baby to her chest. How wonderful you are, how fluffy. He's tricolor, see. Jenna poked her finger at the tiny body. I was told tricolored brings happiness. I'm already the happiest person in the world. I almost burst into tears of delight and tenderness. Liza, that's the way you are. All right, stopped her sentences her friend. We're the best. I don't think so. And she laughed. And now, sitting as in her childhood on the bow of the boat, brought back to life the boat. Liza felt a sense of deep peace. How good was it? Daddy's old favorite boat, which he had once given her as a 5-year-old for her birthday, named pretentiously and lavishly Elizabeth, was back in action. Here she glides silently across the watery surface of the pond, cutting through seaweed, breaking through thickets of jug to a nugget, and another and another. Liza laughed happily, showing her friends an infusion of bright laser birds. A scattering of gems flew up near the shore. There have always been their nests here. I remember how long it's been since she skated like this on this old pond. What magical beauty is there? And on the boat there was a sudden crashing sound next to the cut and calm, standing water. Ahead of them rushed the motor, levering, blasting the propeller, fountains of splash, and leaving behind a real bubbling whirlpool by the cut of the motor closer and closer. Liza stared in amazement at this flying water bike, and at some moment it suddenly dawned on her that in fact it was about to crash into them. Stop, she shouted. And their own boat, already rocking on the waves, lifted by the motorboat and jolted left and right. She sat up, Turkish as she had been when she was a child, frantically clutching at the side of the boat with her hand. Ethan was shouting and swearing at the top of his lungs. He waved his oar, trying to push off and avoid a collision. Some kind of torn t-shirt, desperately twisting the steering wheel and yelling. Back jammed, turn. Ooh, scary jolt, noise, crackle. Liza, unable to keep her balance, falls into the water. Quite near, a terrible spinning propeller. Lisa screams terribly, hides in the depths, and the quiet, bright water in the pond stains. Disgusting, dark red. No, no. As if through a thick blanket, she hears a piercing scream, and she tries to scream something herself. But in her mouth comes a drafty cold water penetrates her nose, her throat, her lungs, and a bright flash explodes in her head and terribly destroys in two. Pain and darkness. One solid, unsightly darkness and silence. No pain, no sounds, no nothing. Bright lights, huge lamps, eerie cold. Why is it so cold? Scary creatures in the same huge half-face sunglasses. The other half is not visible either. The pain is eerie, still developing in two. And Lisa wants to scream at the top of her voice again, but only muffled mooing comes out. She wakes up. Add anesthesia, an enveloping warmth. The bright light is veiled by a white cloth. There is no more pounding of the jackhammer in her head good to sleep. Lisa did not come to her final senses until a week after the accident at the pond. All that time she was kept in a medicated coma. The pain shock was too much. From the terrible injuries, the propeller of the motorboat had severely damaged her spine and nearly ripped off one of her feet. At the clinic where she was brought, an old surgeon, a friend of her icy father, seeing in the patient's chart her rare middle name worriedly, poked his finger. This is not the daughter of an academic. We do not know. With open hands resident, the surgeon ordered to make inquiries. At the post we asked the relatives, and the information was confirmed. It really was Lisa. Hold on, Lisa, said the doctor. You're going to make it, no matter what it costs me. It cost both her and the doctor a week and a half without rest, and almost without sleep. Lisa was under anesthesia and on tranquilizers the whole time. The surgeon was on cigarettes and coffee, but in the end he still managed to pull it out and reattach the foot and reassemble the spine. Now we just had to wait for the result or not. Where are her relatives with red tracing eyes together? The surgeon came out of the operating room to inform them that everything went well. Tomorrow, if there are no excesses during the night, they can be transferred to intensive care. Jenna and Ethan sat in the spacious cottage kitchen of the academic's house, drinking beer, when the phone rang and Ethan was informed that his wife had been successfully operated on for the third and final time. And now we just have to wait for her to wake up. Will she walk? Concerned? Ethan asked. He was told that it was too early to say anything about that. Shit. Ethan threw the phone on the couch with a swing. Survived. Jenna remained silent and concentrated on chewing crabs and chips. Finally, wiping her hands with a napkin and from her bottle, she raised her eyes full of anger. I told you not to call an ambulance. Damn it. And with a swing, she threw the empty bottle into the sideboard. The bottle shattered with a clink, and a pitiful wail came from behind the glass top. Cautiously barked Ethan. Don't hit the antiques. Fuck you. Spit on the floor, Jenna, with her antiques. Suck what? Alive. Your wife, my darling, is alive and still waking up and calculating all by herself or with someone else's help. And they'll kick you and me out of here. And that's only at best at best. Jenna was already screaming with fear and rage. And if you were a coward and did what I said, we'd be golden by now. Calm down, Jenna. Ethan walked over to her and put his arm around her shoulders, sitting in the padded chair. Jenna, come on, let's not. You and I are so good together. We'll think of something. I already have a plan. Jenna, well, think about how we'd look if we didn't call an ambulance right away. I'd be in the cops right now. I'd be finished. You got to be more careful, you know? Careful, and in stages. Okay, Jenna softened up a little bit. But what about this one? What if it cracks? No, Ethan said firmly. He's already there, and his head is in the middle of nowhere. They won't get him from the other side. No one will even look for him. She's an academic's daughter. Damn it. Said Jenna, still how will spit now. Everyone on that academic shook his head. Ethan will not be so knave. Will be the questions will be closed, just like with Peter. But where are you going to get that much? Now this house and the apartment, and everything else that is hers again, or rather yours never was. It didn't work out, it still will. You'll see, winked Ethan. Don't worry, he put his arms around Jenna again and started kissing her. Come on, let's go relieve the stress. No way. She fought back half-jokingly. But after a few minutes, she changed her mood, and the sweet couple departed up the stairs to the second floor to the bedroom. The large window opposite the icy bed accommodated. A bit of divergence and an old poplar tree passed overhead with power line wires. A piece of sky on the side. That, in fact, is all. The night landscape differed from the day landscape in that the tangled grid is a field of other branches. The lanterns of the hospital square came on, and at first an alarming bright yellow light. Liza was frightened to look at these distant lights, trembling in the darkness, and she asked the nurses to close the blinds. Torn had another seizure. Nannies and nurses and orderlies were talking to each other and shaking their understanding heads. Don't go, give the injection. Liza brought a thick syringe to Marley, lying in the iron and wrong, and a painful injection was given through a catheter. After it, it felt like a burning, tissue-developing poison had entered the vein. But after a minute, the feeling would go away. A relaxed and pleasant languor enveloped the entire body and peace ensued. Finally, all day long Liza had been waiting for this evening injection, and already at dusk she began to worry. Why did they not light the lanterns? After all, it would soon be quite dark. See if they are already lit. She asked the nurse. I can't see well. They will. A kind old woman reassured her. Here's another 20 minutes, and then they'll light up. How could they not light up those 20 minutes? It seemed like an eternity for Liza, and she twisted in her bunk. As much as she could, and she could only move her arms and head. She couldn't feel her lower body at all. Finally, the damn lights came on, and after another half hour, the coveted shot would come. That was it. She could sleep and think of nothing until morning, or better yet, until next year, or she could fall asleep and never wake up again. Where she would wake up again, fear, pain, uncertainty, dread of the future. And the bitter piercing thought of why Ethan and Jenna don't come to see her. It's only been 3 days since you've been moved to the ICU, nurse consoled her. You can't have germs yet. Your husband calls every day, asking how are you? Don't worry, honey. Soon he'll come himself. Look at you, he will prescribe you something. Maybe some new medications. The junior medical staff of the surgeon-in-chief, the pride and luminary of the whole hospital, called him respectfully. The doctor's incontestable authority was manifested in the fact that they almost never called him by his patronymic. They just spoke respectfully. He did the operation himself, he said it himself, he appointed it. And if the newcomers, not yet having understood the local chain of command, suddenly asked, for example, who was in charge here, they were answered without thinking how it would sound to an untrained ear. How is it who? He himself came the next day, as promised by the nursemaid, and for a long time was nodding his hammer, Liza, and was putting gauges and turning the wheel, and was looking at the screen of the monitor gloomily and something abruptly. I was dictating to the assistant's attentive sluggishness. Left sinus activity, no right sinus. Activity, minimal interval, contraction, rhythm rate, and other words and phrases nobody except doctors would understand. Having finished, the surgeon sighed and sat down on the chair next to Liza. But somehow les jinka scary, the girl admitted. Sebastian, will I stay lying down forever? It is very, very early to make any predictions, the doctor answered evasively. Believe me, honey, I've done everything I can, and I can do a lot, especially when it comes to the daughter of an old friend of mine. But now you must try to calm down, first of all. Our nerves are almost everything in cases like this. Our spirit, you know? Honey, yes, Liza nodded. I understand. So come on, calm down, do not think about bad things. I picked you up in pieces. Do you really think that the pieces fit together in 2 days? He stroked her head gently. No, it's a long process. It takes a long time to rehabilitate, a very long time. Now go to sleep, and when you wake up, to change your bad mood, I will come. I'll check in 3 days. The surgeon wagged his finger faintly. Look me the door behind him, and his assistant closed, and with them a faint hope. For born in Liza's heart, closed, hid somewhere, like a bright cat in the linen closet, and never showed itself again. Sebastian, The receptionist stopped the doctor in the corridor. "The coroner is here. He wants to know when he can ask the patient to leave the room." "Not now," abruptly threw the doctor. "Let him come back later." "But he won't let go." "Begrudgingly," said the girl. "Tell him the exact date and everything. Tell him she's sick on the tranquilizer. The injuries are very serious and she can't give any testimony now." Jenna sat in the garden on her favorite ice lounger and pondered. The brilliant plan to eliminate Lisa had failed. And why was this bitch proving to be so tenacious? For how long? Thoroughly Jenna thought it over and planned it all. How many sleepless nights had she spent preparing for this decisive day? What had it taken to find the right person capable of such a deed, and yet to make it disappear? All the huge consumer credit Ethan had taken out had gone to these preparations. And lo and behold, there you have it. It's all gone down the drain. Shoo. She tossed the kitten, who wouldn't leave and kept getting underfoot. Ever since the day they had so carefully prepared to celebrate, Kitten jumped to the side and hid in a flower bed among the lush, downed spies and lumpen. After lunch, he and Ethan had to go into town, to the hospital, and again pretend love and friendship. Damn him to hell. Jenna sighed heavily. How had this resisted her whole life? For as long as she could remember, she had to adapt, lie, and wiggle her way around to survive in the filthy room of the matrimonial home, where she lived with her out-of-her-mind grandmother had to ignore the mess from an early age. Her grandmother was often walking under herself in her sleep and dragging some junk from the dumpsters, spreading it all over the place. In the next room lived parents' father alcoholic, mother, tortured, haggard, aged prematurely. A factory worker. When Jenna first went to kindergarten, she, like most children, cried in the clean, shiny group and caring teachers. They comforted her. "Jenna, don't cry. After dinner you can go home. Mommy will come for you. Don't cry." But little Jenna sobbed and sobbed all the time. She did not want to go home at all. It was still clean and cozy here, where it was so wonderful, tasty food from clean plates, and you could play as much as you wanted with the novelties stacked on the shelves, like toys in a store. Would she have loved to stay alive? "No, no," yelled Jenna to the entire locker room. When her mother came to pick her up in the afternoon, for the first week, the babies weren't left until the evening. So they'd adjust better. "I don't want to. I don't want to go home. What's the matter with the baby?" The teachers were amazed. "Everyone is crying and wants to go home, but she wants to stay with us. It must be hard for her at home," summed up the old, experienced babysitter. Just look at the mother of her unhappy woman. It's obvious that the caretakers took care of her. And in a few days it became quite clear how things were in the light of our family. The father is unemployed. He was kicked out of everything for drunkenness. My mother works 2 shifts at a freelance factory. Plus their grandmother is a half-wit, the kindergarten teacher told me quietly. Jenna's parents' neighbor. They have such a smell from their apartment at least. If they open the door when I walk out the door, I try not to even breathe. How do they live? I grabbed my head with my teacher. "We need to inform the guardianship." 100 times we reported it. The neighbor waved it off. They came and looked. The family is full. Mother works, does not drink, does not smoke. So there is no reason to take the child away. And that the father mortgages her and her grandmother keeps her. Is that a reason? Half the country has fathers like that, and the grandmother is sick. Where's she going to go? Warn her mother to take better care of her? And that's the end of it. That's the way it is. The caregivers felt sorry for little Jenna, but at the same time they complained to each other during recess. It's something impossible, I'm ashamed to say. Even Sokolova was brought back in the same underpants. Imagine, her mother just turns them inside out and everything. God, how the poor child will grow up in such conditions. In the end, the pedagogical council of the kindergarten found some way out. Cautiously advised the light mother to settle her daughter in a daycare center. The director herself volunteered to help. You know, she convinced Jenna's mother. It's very good for children with developmental delays. There are children, of course, but not heavy, and do not think it is for those who have difficult family circumstances. You can take the girl home to her family for the weekend and you will feel better. Jenna's mother didn't think long And a month later, little Jenna finally found a peaceful home. To think that from that daycare, you didn't have to go home. While her mother quietly turned the 4-year-old girls back to her mother and waved goodbye, I went. Even for the weekend, she adamantly refused to go home. And the caretakers on duty did not mind such company. The girl was a rare, independent, and sober-minded. In addition, in every way tried to help the nurses. My mother works 2 shifts at a freelance factory, plus their grandmother is a half-wit, the kindergarten teacher told me quietly. Jenna's parents' neighbor. They'd have such a smell from their apartment at least. If they open the door when I walk out the door, I try not to even breathe. How do they live? I grabbed my head with my teacher. We need to inform the guardianship. 100 times we reported it. The neighbor waved it off. They came and looked. The family is full, mother works, does not drink, does not smoke. So there is no reason to take the child away. And that the father mortgages her and her grandmother keeps her? Is that a reason? Half the country has fathers like that, and the grandmother is sick. Where's she going to go? Warn her mother to take better care of her. And that's the end of it. That's the way it is. The caregivers felt sorry for little Jenna, but at the same time they complained to each other during recess. It's something impossible. I'm ashamed to say. Even Sokolova was brought back in the same underpants. Imagine, her mother just turns them inside out and everything. God, how the poor child will grow up in such conditions. In the end, the pedagogical council of the kindergarten found some way out. Cautiously advised the light mother to settle her daughter in a daycare center. The director herself volunteered to help. You know, she convinced Jenna's mother. It's very good for children with developmental delays. There are children, of course, but not heavy, and do not think it is for those who have difficult family circumstances. You can take the girl home to her family for the weekend and you will feel better. Jenna's mother didn't think long, and a month later little Jenna finally found a peaceful home. To think that from that daycare you didn't have to go home. While her mother quietly turned the 4-year-old girls back to her mother and waved goodbye, I went. Even for the weekend, she adamantly refused to go home. And the caretakers on duty did not mind such company. The girl was a rare, independent, and sober-minded. In addition, in every way tried to help the nurses. I wish they would not let her go home, and she would collect the dishes, wipe the dust, and arrange all the toys neatly. She would bring in a committee, and you couldn't get her to do anything wrong. She built the whole group like a real teacher. But this girl will not be lost. Teachers grinned. She won't let anyone get away with it. She just wants to get her own way. Jenna really didn't give a damn. Neither at the boarding school nor at school, let alone in sports clubs. Strong, physically well-developed, in the 2nd grade she signed up for judo on her own. By 6th grade, she was already a master of sports in the junior division. From now on, she was no longer afraid of her father's wrath. After she put her father down with a clever trick near the toilet, when he threatened to drown her head in the toilet for some wrongdoing, as he had done more than once. Jenna used to be a person untouchable in the house. She marked her new status by kicking her grandmother out of her room, along with her missing urine, cat, and other filthy attempts to make sure she was never heard from again. Screamed all over the apartment. It was a viper's house, Jenna's mother. And seeing this state of affairs with shaking hands, she arranged her grandmother in a tiny pantry, and she did not care anymore. She had little idea who she was or where she was. Jenna was very active. She got long rubber gloves and dry bleach from the school janitor and scrubbed the entire apartment to a shine, including the toilet with a smelly toilet and bathroom, and the kitchen, barely visible through cigarettes and smoke, and grease-washed, miserable curtains threw out all the junk, and at the end hit my father. I see him come home with a bottle again. I'll piss him off till he bleeds. With these hands I got it. And I'll also add milk with my feet and my drink where you want it, and you can die. There at the same time. The father was lost in silence, playing and frantically crook. Grandmother muttered something behind the curtain in the pantry, and mother, coming out into the kitchen, where Jenna was concentrating on cooking something in open pots, sank down on the stool in tears. I had a daughter of some kind, and that was all that semi-literate, battered by fate, and an alcoholic husband. The woman was capable of expressing her feelings. "Don't drift," Olia's mother hugged her. "Jenna, you and I now know how we're going to heal." And they did make a new life. Missing the last health, father openly communicate with his resolute daughter, afraid back a movement in the dumps, stopped simply by not letting her outside the apartment. Jenna almost forcibly took her mother to the instances for certificates and the state welfare office, where they were prescribed free diapers for the sick old woman, medicine, and more allowance in the form of some cents, and a dry ration for the holidays. Jenna immediately pawed at these little transfers. "Without me, you'd never have gotten it in your life. It would be for my out-of-pocket expenses, thus arranging my life." The perky Jenna embarked on further transformations, passed the standards for the Olympic reserves, enrolled in a sports school. "I had to go to the hell, on the other end of the city, in the farthest distance." But could such a trifle stop the armored, battle-hardened tank named Jenna? There was no pupil more tenacious than this girl, and by the end of the school year, she was already at the head of the Student Council Sports School, was captain of the volleyball team, winner of school, city, and regional competitions, and among the best was going to a training camp in Bulgaria. "Look," she threatened my relatives, "that in my absence, everything was tip-top. I'll come, I'll check on you, I'll find a solution. Don't worry, this is separate to my father." The next day, she brought home a guy 3 years older who put in the light of a movie room, a lock. "That's it. The border is locked," she grinned. "No one gets in, no one gets through." Signed her mother's application for the school. And closing her doors, she left for Bulgaria for a month and a half. Thus, in 7th grade, the paths from the branch athlete, daughter of a drunkard and semi-literate worker, and Lisa, excellent students and artists, academically blue bloods, could forever part. And kept them close to each other. Perhaps the preferences and gifts with a golden rain shed a branch from the generosity of an icy academic dad, or maybe the sincere light of hope and affection light up in the icy eyes at the sight of a beloved friend, or, for example, the pleasure of visiting a rich, cozy home, where always carefully dressed Mother Lisa sat with a book near the big window and smiled, slightly squinting at her beautiful eyes. "Girls, go wash your hands for dinner." Today, I made pudding and jam full of ruddy girls, happy wearing and sparkling cleanliness of the kitchen, incredibly delicious dishes. And just how do people cook such things? And all this decent, comfortable, real life, into which she, Jenna, is allowed only as a guest, with the years growing up and gaining experience. Jenna has increasingly begun to wonder why it is that some people have everything and others have nothing. Why not her? Liza has such a rich house, good food, servants, and no problems. And Jenna has the sickly, weak, and weak-willed one she thought she had. Well, yes, she was lucky in life. She was born the daughter of an academic. But why does it always have to be that way? She, Jenna, is 100 times more deserving of a good life than this unaccustomed to anything. The one who can't do anything worthwhile. Can't cook worth a damn. Of course, all the servants before her mother did. She's afraid to get her thin, weak fingers dirty with anything but her lousy, useless paints. Hardly even know how to pay the rent. Since her parents were gone, all the household chores had fallen on her shoulders. Look with bewilderment showed her Lisa a piece of paper thrown in the mailbox. "It says here that it is time to have the meters checked." "What do you mean?" "I do not even know who to turn to." Let's have a condescending smile. Jenna was cleaning up, folding her piece of paper in her pocket. "I'll go to the HNO next week. They need to make an application." And so in everything. Absolutely everything. It got a little easier when that unreasonable face somehow managed to get married. Jenna herself had long ago abandoned those silly dreams of adolescence. Here she will meet a handsome prince who will solve all her financial problems at once and take her away to a beautiful future on a white horse. In a Mercedes, of course. In fact, a handsome prince. At least, the ones that came up off the branch along the way needed only one thing. And that did not at all include solving her problem and arranging a happy future. And where was she to get so much self-control and intelligence to not show the prince her considerable strength both physically and volitional? Those beautiful princes who hung out at rich restaurants and nightclubs, and misguided concerts, and the conservatory were beyond her reach. She had everything obviously painted on her face. Here was a working-class girl and nothing to take from her. Except the very thing that interests any prince, only a one-time thing. When Jenna finally realized all this, she was angry. Angry for real, creepily reached and knuckles out. It turned out that she, who has everything and worldly intelligence, and wit, and strength to twist any of the refined rich bastards into a mutton horn, not to see this beautiful life as her ears. And in spite of all her athletic prowess, she would not be able to get into high society. Why did she end up taking the slippery and criminal path? After all, she could have worked her way up to the top of the sports Olympus, where the international champions start sharply up in a high-speed social elevator. She could get everything she wanted: money, status, and recognition. She probably would have been able to eventually, but the same black anger and envy that filled her tainted heart in her first adult season, not her, but another girl from a prosperous and successful family, was chosen as a candidate for a major international competition, prevented her. And since then, Jenna finally lost faith in the possibility of achieving something worthwhile solely by her own efforts. But the need for this achievement still ate her soul from the inside, did not allow her to live in peace. And so the fate of poor friend Lisa was already predetermined. The final black light shaped the day when the newly minted Lisa's husband mistook her for his young wife in the swanky bathroom of their city apartment. This was the last year of the fatherless's life, confined to bed by an incurable creature. She and Ethan became secret lovers, and Lisa didn't notice anything, living as she always did, in her perfectly made-up world of rosy dreams. "You should watch him begging," she told her friend, leaving for the plein air and referring to her husband. Men are so not adapted herself, Jenna thought, and smiling sweetly, she said, of course, dear, don't worry. In fact, 4 of the 6 years of leasing a marriage, they were already living as a threesome, a kind of Swedish family. The only difference was that one of the family members was unaware of this state of affairs. The hospital lobby was crowded. During visiting hours, relatives and friends swarmed to see patients. Here and there they unwrapped packages, rustling cellophane bags and paper wrappers. A strict, orderly attendant showed them the food they had brought and sighing, "Put aside the things that were not allowed to be passed on. Where should we go?" Confused Ethan, looking around. To the 3rd trauma through the passageway and to the right to the elevator. And there to the 3rd floor, mouthed Jenna. "You were told you forgot. How do you keep all this in your head?" Amazed Ethan and obediently followed to the intensive. Dropped Jenna at the post. "No, nothing," and again, "They didn't bring anything." She can't have anything at all yet. Walking up to Jenna's room, busily pulled a bouquet of cottage flowers from a bag, elegantly bandaged. "Here," handing it to her companion. And with a smile on her face, she sailed into the room. "Hello, little one," stretching out the words and doting on them, like with a baby. Cautiously hugged her friend. "How are you, dear? We were so worried about you. It's nothing now." Lisa smiled faintly. "How nice that you finally came." "They just let me in today." Jenna made unhappy eyes. "I was about ready to tear them all to shreds." She laughed at her own joke. Lisa smiled through restraint, too. "I know you can do it." Ethan stepped quietly closer. "Sweetheart, here are your favorite flowers. I was so worried." "Thank you." Lisa's eyes shone for a moment at the sight of Ethan and the flowers. "Thank you, sweetheart. Do you remember anything about what happened?" Cautiously, Jenna asked, peering into her friend Lisa's face. Her features were distorted with anguish. Memories of monstrous pain came flooding back at once. She closed her eyes and sighed convulsively, trying to cope with the accumulated panic. No, she shook her head and pulled her hand heavily up to her temple. "It's all a blur later." Okay. Frightenedly murmured Jenna. "Don't. Sorry. Let's not talk about it yet." She stroked Lisa's hand affectionately. "That's it. It's all over now. Soon you will be completely recovered. When you come home, we'll put you on the veranda. It's nice and fresh out there. You can watch the leaves fall." "And how is Tom?" Suddenly Lisa asked, opening her eyes. "Who isn't?" "My kitten. Tom. There's nothing wrong with the cat. He's torn the curtains out of the kitchen already. He's cute. He has a warm glow in his eyes. Liza, I want to hug him. You'll get there. Don't you worry about a thing. Ethan crouched on the edge of the bed and kissed his wife on the forehead. We are all right, and so is Tom. Your students have already cut all the wires, he grinned. They call, they come, they ask when they can visit you. Do they wish you a speedy recovery? Of course they do. Tell them that I love them all very much, said Liza fondly. I love them all, said Liza tenderly. I love you too. What would I do without you both? She took a glance at her two favorite people, her husband and her friend. And she sighed contentedly. Seeing you makes my heart feel better. We'll be coming back often now, Jenna promised. Soon you'll be able to eat anything. I'll bake you some cakes, and I really want some of your cakes. Liza smiled. You are my sweetheart. I just don't know how much more I can take. Jenna exhaled as she left the room. I'm exhausted. Can you handle it? He patted her on the shoulder. Ethan, you are my strong one. Too strong, Jenna thought bitterly. I was so sick of it. Let's go have a smoke, she said to her lover. We have to go to the investigator tomorrow. For the first time, they were questioned almost immediately on the day of the incident. There was a commotion of general shouting, Rob's eyes bulging with fear. They needed him with them as an impartial witness. That's why they invited him out of town. The runaway of their established dacha neighbors, the ambulance shrill, screaming with all its sirens. No need to call anyone, dropping the call. Quietly and insistently said Jenna, frightened, and facing the men while he frantically poked at the buttons of his phone. At the same time on the grass, solidly made of fresh blood, dazed, and Rob was trying to give her CPR. He pulled her out of the maimed and bloodied shore, and cursing at the top of his lungs and interspersing his screams with foul language. Don't you understand? Ethan hissed at Jenna. The neighbors are going to call an ambulance. Look at this crowd, and they'll call the cops too. What am I gonna say about not getting through? No way. How's it gonna go now? Look at her. Can she really come to her senses after that? And with trembling hands took out a gum cigarette from the pack. Pretend desperately rushed Jenna, again to her friend lying on the grass, seeing under the running neighbors. What on earth is going on? Who thought of launching this rusty iron into the water? The guy who had been running the engine and on the sleigh had vanished somewhere. And now she was rolling on the water from side to side, standing, banging with the engine not turned off at the shore to take in sand and green paint. Somebody begged Jenna, turn off that goddamn tot-talker for God's sake. The man's neighbors immediately rushed to turn it off, and after a while earned the curses of the operatives who arrived on the scene. Why the hell did they get into the boat? Now all the fingerprints were covered. They didn't know yet that there were no fingerprints, because the hired kid was running the motor and wearing the thin, see-through drunken gloves Jenna had given him. It was impossible to see that fact from afar. No one really remembered his appearance either. He had dark hair, Rob said uncertainly, grizzled and crazy eyes. Have you seen this man before? Asked all the eyewitnesses of what happened one by one. No, they shook their heads, and Rob had never been seen here either. Never seen anything like this at our cottages, for sure. He looked like a Mexican. Rob wrinkled his forehead. Or maybe a gypsy or a Korean smirked at the operative. I don't know, the hell he could tell. Confused interviewees. It was far away at first, and then no one even looked at him. So what was wrong with his eyes? The question was addressed to Jenna. He was wearing glasses. She told the operatives confidently. Big diving goggles, so I don't know what kind of eyes were under there. She spread her hands and suddenly howled thinly and pitifully, like a wolf. Find him, I beg you. Find that bastard. Liza, my friend. She's like my sister, you know? Jenna yelled and sobbed. Her face was swollen with tears, and to all further questions addressed to her, only shook her head stubbornly and sobbed her friend. The girl is hysterical. The operatives stated indifferently, see her to the paramedics. The ambulance, which arrived, having loaded Liza into the car with all possible precautions, drove off with a piercing shriek, leaving the village paramedic. You take care of you. The doctor commanded the woman and jumped into the departing car. We'll send for you. How will they get here? The paramedic covered Jenna with a blanket, gave her a soothing injection, and told her wife to give her some tea. Do you have chamomile, peppermint? I don't. In desperation, he broke his hands. I don't know. There's something in the cupboard. Over there, he didn't even have to act so panicked and terrified. He was already in that very state, only not from the fact of what had happened, but from the fact that his wife managed to still breathe. When the ambulance arrived, she would be fine. Do you think she will recover? Every now and then, he asked the paramedic. Concentratedly born in the jars of the kitchen cabinet. I'm not a doctor. She fought back at first, but to no avail. Her husband kept up, so she had to be frank. You have to brace yourself and prepare for the worst. Young man, I've seen a lot. The injuries are too serious. Surely if Lisa had fallen into the hands of another surgeon, it would have been over for her by now. But for her luck, or maybe for her misfortune, it was myself who was on duty at the trauma center that day. A month after these events, there was some improvement in her condition. Instruments showed that the nerves in her spine were responding to irritation. But why couldn't she move her legs? Ethan asked the attending physician with a face. You see, the doctor answered. With this kind of injury, the internal connections in the body are disrupted. How can I put it simply? The brain doesn't respond sufficiently to the fact that the spine can function again. There is a sort of natural blockage. It takes a long rehabilitation period. Special exercises. A special specialist deals with such patients. We recommend you after discharge. Don't worry, finally, and an investigator broke through to Lisa and, leaving his white coat, entered the room. Good afternoon. My name is David. I am the investigator on your case. You need to tell me everything you remember about the day of the accident. I don't remember much. Liza's eyes filled with pain and tears. It was so terrible, so sudden. Yes, I understand, the investigator said softly, but still you must try. What did the man who drove the motorboat look like? Like a big frog, said Lisa the big frog. Not even a toad, you see. Not really. The investigator shook his head. Try to describe your impressions in more detail. There was something wrong with his eyes. With an effort, Lisa said, and the hands. They were something as the investigator leaned forward. Slippery. Suddenly, Lisa understood her sensations. His hands were slippery, sticky. How can you tell if you have not touched his hands? The man clarified. I don't know, Lisa shook her head. It just seemed that way. Well, all right. The inspector sighed wearily. Let's put it in the report. Sign here, please. You see, it is written from my words, and so on. None of the testimony of witnesses did not help the investigation, because the criminal who drove a motorboat had long ago crossed the border of the country, having left immediately after his pernicious deed in a car with a friend, waiting for him in the near future. Jenna found this man moonlighting at neighboring cottages in another village and bribed him with a lot of money. Explained that they needed to do some rusty motor work. They had been looking in an old barn for a long time, and one night under cover of night, the two accomplices brought a working motor, bought at a flea market. Unbeknownst to them, it was impossible to find out who had the smart Jenna, and then pulled it out and dragged it to the pond, where they hid it disguised with a stretched tent and a pile of branches. Such a spectacle was not new to the dacha residents. Every now and then someone sawed and trimmed the old fruit trees, dropping the discarded branches at random. The outrageousness again piled up. The dacha owners were squeamishly wrinkling their nose as they walked around the obstacles. And that was the end of it. Apparently, Lisa turned out to be much stronger than everybody thought. And she was getting better every day, but only with one half of her body. Her lower half was still not working. One day after dinner, she was approached by a trim, muscular man with pleasant brown eyes. Lisa, good afternoon. Hello, Lisa was surprised. We don't seem to know each other. He was not wearing a medical uniform, only a lightweight. That is why she did not understand why some stranger came, and even why he called her by her name. Now we have met, the visitor smiled. Allow me to introduce myself. I am your physical therapist and physical therapist coach, James. Pleased to meet you. Lisa sighed in relief. And I thought that one of the visitors mixed up the room? No, laughed James. I'm attached to you now. He looked at Lisa affectionately and kindly. I apologize for what I am about to do, but you will have to be patient. Is my intervention ready? Yes, Lisa nodded cautiously. I suppose we shall begin then. He gingerly groped all over her body with his strong and warm fingers, starting, oddly enough, with her head. He moved her temples to the back of her collarbone. Turned his hands here, and there something wrote in our tablet frowned. Then he said something incomprehensible to Lisa. Let's you and I try to wiggle our tongues. Look like this. I will show you. And as a result, for about 15 minutes they made different faces, opened and closed their mouths, and made all sorts of noises. What was all that for? Asked a tired Lisa in the end. Everything in our bodies is connected, James answered her. You may think that the tongue and the locomotor system have nothing to do with each other, but in fact that is completely wrong. When we do an exercise with our tongue, it has a very effective effect on our baseline, and to it, in turn, our legs are attached. Do you understand the connection? Lisa kind of nodded. But you know, I am so tired. It's just as it should be, the doctor smiled. Because now all your muscles were working in a bundle. But I'm watching your lower extremities now, and you relax. Okay, if you feel anything, don't hesitate to say anything. Even the faintest sensation. Lisa closed her eyes and prepared to experience the sensations. Minutes passed, but nothing happened. So it seemed to her. But there was something like a slight warmth. She couldn't make it out, so she opened her eyes and said, I think I felt something just now, when James looked up, and now he was moving his hand to his toes. And Lisa nodded affirmatively, didn't she? I think so. Good. Satisfied doctor again covered her feet with the blanket and began. But until tomorrow, Elizabeth. Call me just Lisa, please, she asked. I am used to it. All right, Lisa. He smiled. See you tomorrow at the same time. From that first day on, she looked forward to her appointments, just as she had looked forward to her injections in the evening. Those injections had been canceled long ago, and for the first time she suffered greatly, feeling a terrible desire to experience again that wonderful feeling of lightness, and then complete indifference to everything that came after the injection. But the doctors said no more. For about a week and a half, Lisa was in the evenings in a disgustingly irritable state, but there was nothing she could do. And you don't want to. She had to get used to the fact that the coveted shots were no longer available. The class was now a new solace for her. When he came with him into the room, joy came in. Hope when he removed. The sky was calling, the clouds were nodding, and Jenna and Ethan were holding a war council at home at the academic cottage. By this time, they were being dragged through the offices of the investigative department, and with each visit they became more and more anxious. No more waiting. I convinced Jenna, my lover, as much as I could. But how are we going to get it back? He fought back. There are a lot of people there, doctors, nurses. We have to wait to take him home. This is all your fucking indecision. Jenna got mad. What's my indecision to discount, Ethan? You think I'm the one who didn't kill her with a screwdriver? What does that have to do with me? You should have steered the boat. Yelling at Jenna, you know? You should have steered it. Ethan snapped and went out to smoke on the veranda. But she wouldn't let up and wouldn't leave him alone there. Oh, so it's not enough that I planned and organized everything. It's enough that you came up with the perfect scenario, found the performers, and calculated everything to the smallest detail. And what did you do? I'm asking you. Who took the credit? Couldn't stand the money for the whole event. Who got it? Or do you think it came out of thin air? That's what you should have done. Now would have given his credit, Jenna parried, but softened a little. That said, let's not have a reminder, eh? Asked the softer Ethan. So, already fed up with everything above the roof, can't we at least stop fighting amongst ourselves? He admired Jenna, admired her determination and perseverance. He was crazy about her beautiful training body and the things she did with that body too. That was certainly something she could never do. And he didn't really want to. He had married her for her money, having met her by chance at her art academy, where he had come to fix the wiring. Ethan was a good electrician. He knew his job and loved it. He He had the highest clearance and could tell the difference between 0 and ground with his eyes closed. The professional terms for the available voltage in the cable: delicate and beautiful as a fragile spring flower. The girl attracted him by her defenseless trustfulness, unlike all the other women he usually dealt with. When it turned out that she was also the daughter of a famous academic with many material benefits, which Ethan was so eager for, he added momentum. And soon they had already set a date for the wedding. Her mother had long since left her relatives, settled down in the Central City cemetery, and could not tell her daughter that such hasty and unequal marriages are very rarely successful. And the choice of a future husband is a little strange. But what could she have in common? Raised by caring parents with love, intellectual to the bone, received the best education, enthusiastic painter, a young girl and a working electrician, who finished 9 grades at the college. And my father was already too ill to have a good sense of what was going on. Perhaps it was this circumstance that drove Lisa into the arms of the handsome electrician. She was madly afraid to be alone. "What do you think of him?" Embarrassed and blushing, she asked her faithful friend Jenna. The one felt her eyes and winked. It seems to be all in front of him checked the working machine. What machine? Lisa did not understand. And finding out with the help of her friend the essence of the joke, blushed thickly. "What are you like? Don't joke. I'm asking you." "And I had already forgotten that you have a fairy princess." Jenna teased chastely and her friend. "Kept for the one and only. Don't need the light." Confusion. "Lisa, why would you do that?" Okay, Jenna throwing up her hands conciliatorily. "That's it. I made a bad joke. Forgive me, you irresponsible idiot." "You're not stupid at all." The good Lisa gently stroked her friend's arm. "You just had a different upbringing. You know, I would like to be like you, just as brave, just as independent." Lisa sighed, "But it's impossible. I am what I am, and so are you. And it's not our fault, it's not our fault," Jenna agreed nonchalantly. "Come on, enough of this already." At the very end of September, Lisa was finally discharged home. She was now moving around the house in a wheelchair, accompanied everywhere by a nurse, and was a terrible burden on Ethan and Jenna. 3 times a week, James came to her to do remedial physical therapy, and the rest of the time, if she was awake, she sat on the big glass veranda, sketching or working on endless still lifes and landscapes. "Now's the time," said Jenna. "One night, and I don't mind anymore. I've already made arrangements for Wednesday. Don't drift. Everything will be fine." Seeing the change in Ethan's face, she put her warm and firm palm on one of his knees. "Just a little longer, and we'll be free. Are you sure?" He looked at her, concerned. Quite sure. They left the next day to get their passports and returned in high spirits with beers. Lavender tea for Lisa and a big cake. Baby called Ethan. Entering the veranda, we returned. "The cake is brought, and let's go drink tea." "Good," she smiled at him. Now the executive nurse helped her gather her brushes and paints and rolled to the dining room and left, washing the assembled art supplies. Jenna, smiling like a fox, showed Lisa a large packet of pills. "Look what I bought. A friend recommended it. She said it helps to sleep well and relieves anxiety. Let's try them. You're my good at carrying my." Lisa was touched. It never occurred to her to doubt the good intentions of her dear friend. "Of course we will. Otherwise, all I see different head cracks like eyes. I close the heart flutters, as if it is about to jump out. So, the neurologist prescribed it, but it's not working very well. You'll tell me later how it's working." Jenna handed her a glass of water and a large pill. "Watch out for the golden one." The next morning, Lisa woke up as good as new. Her head did not rattle or hurt, and she felt pleasantly alert in all her muscles. "What a great drug." Encouraged, she said. Jenna and Ethan at breakfast. "I had such a good night's sleep." "There you go," rejoiced Jenna. "My friend's doctor said to take it 3 times a day. It doesn't make you sleepy either." "That's great. That's just fine." Never tired of praising Lisa, the tried and true medicine. By the way, Lisa told Jenna to take a bite out of her sandwich. "We wanted to talk to you about something. There's a lot of stuff piled up. While you were in the hospital, there was a utility bill, an electric meter. I got to change it in town, get a temporary disability to extend my vacation time at work. I have to open a special account for Social Security so they can transfer my allowance. To drive you every time is only to torture you. It's very inconvenient and pathetic. Yes, Lisa frowned. What to do? I learned with enthusiasm, continued Jenna, that you can make a special power of attorney at a notary with all the rights, so you can do everything without you. Expensive, of course, but at least you don't have to worry about any questions at any time. Can you imagine how convenient that would be? Great, Liza nodded. Sure, let's do it. But there's probably a line for a specific time. I've already made an appointment. Jenna winked. There won't be any lines. The notary will come right here to our place. It's a little more expensive, but it won't involve you. Which one? What's my smart light? Liza looked at her friend with genuine admiration. I would never have thought to register for you myself. Aha. Jenna smiled proudly. I am. You don't have to do it on me. We're legally strangers to you. She's upset. She shook her hands. They'll charge you 3 times as much, so you sign for Ethan. It's cheaper with a spouse. Hurriedly, minute by minute, looking at her watch, the lady notary arrived half an hour late. They were already getting nervous about not getting there at all. But they explained the deals to you. It takes a lot of time today. It's impossible to calculate to the minute. She snapped at them. Where is the patient? This way, please. Jenna went to the veranda of the woods. There came a notary sitting without an easel for the occasion. Lisa turned around. Hello. Good afternoon, muttered the lady, taking papers out of her briefcase. What is your name? Lisa. The notary looked at her, then again at her passport, nodded to her thoughts, and began to scribble in the register again. After a minute, she took her notes and said, Please acquaint yourself with the text of the power of attorney. Oh, how much amazed Liza. Do I have to read it all? As you wish, the notary said dryly. I would like to notify you that a power of attorney with the right to manage and dispose of all your property is made out in the name of your spouse, Ethan. Year of birth, passport details. The registration is on a special form, recorded in the electronic registry. If you want to cancel, she kept saying something, talking in her head. Every word in Lisa's head sounded like mush. Lines danced before her eyes and merged into ugly colored blobs. Did you understand everything? Did the notary's last question bring her out of her stupor? Yes, she nodded, wishing that this unpleasant, strange woman would leave their house as soon as possible. She understood. Where shall I sign? Here is a short signature with the first and last name. That's the whole thing. Now it's the same here. So now in the registry. How many times? Liza thought to herself, painstakingly drawing out line after line in her clear handwriting. Now that's it. The notary slammed the register shut noisily. All the best to you and to you. Mechanically, Liza repeated, and with a sigh of relief, she threw herself on the cushion in her baby carriage. A couple of days later, Ethan said to Lisa, a sheet will need to go into town for a while. Jenna, a nurse with you, of course. And I have to stay here. What's Lisa worried about? The heating system has to be repaired. Our boiler's breaking down. You'll all freeze here when we turn off the heat. And that's not the way to do it. The house will freeze in winter if the boiler is bent. What a horror. Lisa sighed frantically. The troubles again. What kind of misfortune? Little Ethan smiled affectionately at her spouse. It is nothing. It just takes a certain amount of time. And they drove off. The gray and dull days of the city stretched on. There was no space and air of dacha, no big and bright veranda and Jenna, and became something irritable and perpetually embittered. All the time going somewhere, going away, now and then answered the phone. She tried to go out into the porch so that Liza could not hear what she was talking about. Jenna, what's the matter? Liza asked her friend, but she only said something vague. And then Liza shrugged it off. Then I told you that a lot of things piled up. I will be free and we will go with you again to the cottage. How is the heating, dear? Liza asked her husband on the phone. It is still a long time almost finished, he reported. I also did a little bit of electrics. While at work, all the same fall stagnation. Well, in short, another couple of weeks and you'll be back. Liza was anxious, worried, and probably wouldn't have slept well if it weren't for the wonderful pills. When she took them, everything that was going on worried her much less. True, now she had to take 2 pills at once, but that was no big deal. The main thing was that it helped, and only her girlfriend and the motley Tom, Lisa's pet Fluffy Ball, said all day long, cheered her out of her heart. James, who came as neatly as he did to the cottage to study. "You have to try harder," he said to Lisa, "and lately you have been a little sluggish, relaxed." "What is the matter?" "Yes, I am worried about something," complained Liza. At the cottage repair, Jenna was running around the house with all her problems. "Let's concentrate and work." Called James, "Do you want to get back on your feet by spring or what?" "I do, of course I do." Liza smiled. "I will do my best." Finally, the repairs were finished, and she was taken back to the country house. Liza didn't notice any particular change, and they were not supposed to be. They had changed the pipes or something. That was Ethan's explanation. And it especially, and did not go into detail. The main thing now, her favorite veranda was once again at her complete disposal. At dinner, Jenna said, as if by chance, the woods. "I'm going to have to go away for a while, and we have some important packing to do. I've already missed a lot, you know." Sure, what are you talking about?" Liza nodded. "Go, of course. Do you want Ethan to take you to the train, or do you have to get there somehow?" "That's the point," Jenna said. "Exactly how you're going to get there." All of us had already left, and it was the last minute. It was a shame to leave you all alone like that in the city, you know? That's why I can't get the tickets I need. It's too expensive by plane, and all the good ones are taken by train. Would you mind if Ethan gave me a ride to Leh, and there's a good ticket from there?" I looked it up. "Of course you did. What are you talking about?" Liza exclaimed. "What would I be if I objected? Do you care so much for me? Go ahead, both of you, of course." "Then we'll say goodbye," Jenna smiled. "We need to leave early tomorrow to get there in time. 4:00 a.m., Ethan?" "I guess so." Ethan agreed. "And you, honey, go to sleep, don't worry. And don't forget to take your pills. They are so good for you." The day when Liza was left all alone, not counting the nurse and the kitten, was unusually good and sunny. It was just some kind of unplanned holiday by nature. In mid-November, Liza asked the caregiver to take herself out into the garden, sit in the sun, get some fresh air. Then had breakfast, at about 11 o'clock as usual, and went out on the veranda to work, as long as there is good light. About an hour later, I heard the noise of the automatic gate pulling away. Surprised and alarmed, had Ethan and Jenna returned. Maybe they had forgotten something important, like a passport, and now they would be late for their train. But an unfamiliar car drove into the courtyard. Out of it came strangers, a woman and a man, and with them a small child. They went to the front door of the house as if they were going home and opened it with the key. "Nina," Liza shouted to the nurse. "Nina, come here, for God's sake. Some strange people have come to our yard. Go and ask them what they want." Nina left, and Liza sat alone again on the veranda, listening to the animated dialogue between her and the visitors. Liza's words were barely audible from the veranda. And here comes the anxious Nina, and with her the man who came in a big unfamiliar car. "Good day. Weren't you supposed to leave before today, like you said?" "What do you mean?" "I don't understand." "Liza, what was the deal?" "With whom?" "With the sellers, of course," the man hummed. "We bought this house." "You bought the house?" Liza's eyes went dark. "No, it cannot be. There must be some terrible mistake. This is my house. I have lived here for a long time. The cottage belonged to my late father and then to me. But you sold it to us." The man took some yellow paper out of his bag. "Look at this. Did your husband sign the contract for you by proxy?" "Read it. Read it. You gave him power of attorney." "I did." Liza echoed. But I didn't know. Listen to me. I had no intention of selling the house." She shouted, finally realizing what was going on. "Ethan, someone must have deceived her, misled her." Wait, I'll call him now." She pulled out her phone and pressed the call button. There were no beeps for a long time. And then the cellular operator reported, in the voice of a mindless mechanical robot, that the subscriber did not answer or was temporarily unavailable, not picking up the phone. There must be no connection. On the way they left this morning, Ethan and Jenna. "You know, Jenna has a flight out of Lala today," she said, to the man who was standing below her, looking around. "Coming from what view?" "William, well." Then his wife came in and also looked at Lisa with surprise. "And who are you, exactly?" "I am the mistress of this cottage," Lisa told her, rather uncertainly. "It was sold to you by mistake, by mistake. There was a woman in it by mistake. You say yes, I'm going to call the police." "What kind of mistake? This is no joke, my dear. Here's the contract. Here's the deed. This is our house now. So I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." "Leave?" Lisa was indignant. "Where do you expect me to go? Why should we care?" The woman grinned. "It is no longer our concern." Shaking with terror, Lisa dialed Jenna and Ethan over and over again, but could never reach them. Then, in utter despair, she called James. "Hello, James. It's Lisa, yes. You know, I have a terrible situation. Some strangers came and said I sold them the cottage, but I didn't sell it." Ethan signed the contract by proxy. He must have been cheated by someone. "Maybe the same people who came in are kicking me out. Where am I going to go? Who's going to take me to a cab, to my apartment? I don't even know who to turn to anymore. Could you come and take me to town? Please, I'll pay." James assured her that he would be there soon, and asked not to worry and told the stranger that he would come and take her away within the hour. Another conversation nodded to the newfound owners. Waiting, of course. What are we, some kind of fiends? And they left the veranda and began to carry bags and boxes out of the car. Lisa sat in her wheelchair, swallowing her tears and convulsively clutching her pale, thin arms, breaking, crunching her fingers. "Nina, please," she asked the nurse. "Bring me my pills, please." "Yes, I know it's not evening yet, but I'm terribly worried, Nina. Bring them, please." After taking the pills, Lisa was able to breathe freer in her chest, the pressure stopped, and there were no more dark circles floating in her eyes. Her head went away, her eyes were pitying, and she practically fell asleep sitting in her chair. It seemed like only 5 minutes had passed and James had already arrived. "What's going on here?" Concernedly, he asked. "Come on, put your arms around my neck. I'll carry you to the car. Don't forget the lid." Lisa got worried. He must not stay here alone. They loaded up both Tom and Nine, the caregiver, who in the meantime had time to pack up some of Lisa's necessities, and left for town. Outside the apartment, an unpleasant surprise awaited them again. Lisa on the keys did not fit the lock, which was a new key and shown on the native and familiar from childhood door. "What is it? I do not understand anything anymore." Lisa cried out in despair. "How is it? Why can't I enter my own apartment?" "Calm down." James pushed the bell button. "We'll deal with it in a moment. What do you want?" The door was opened on a chain by an older woman who was a complete stranger to Lisa. "Who are you here to see?" "I live here," shouted Lisa and tried, climbing forward in her wheelchair, to grab hold of the door with her hand. But James intercepted her in time, and the gap pressed her foot. "Look," he said to the woman who answered the door. "This girl lives here. She's the landlady of the apartment. What kind of nonsense is that?" The woman became indignant. "My son bought this apartment a week ago. They're on vacation now, and they left me with my grandson. Get out of here before the baby wakes up, or I'll call the police." Tears of despair and horror made Lisa's eyes water as James carried her downstairs again to the car, sat her down in her chair. He went back into the driveway to get the stroller, and Lisa tried to call her husband again. To no avail. This is a nightmare. Some kind of dream. She complained to James, who had returned. "I have no idea what to do now. Let's go to my place," the doctor told her. "Stay a few days. You can meet my family there. We'll work something out." He did not tell her right away that her husband and best friend had most likely abandoned her ruthlessly, selling her house and apartment, while they migrated to other more distant lands. Of course, this was the case the hour Lisa discovered that her entire place no longer belonged to her. They were already on a plane, and the plane was approaching the coast of the warm South Sea. none of the LA they drove to. The car, which had also been sold, was handed over to its new owner near the airport and lightly. The solid sums transferred a couple of days before to Jenna, and Jenya's accounts from Lisa's account flew off to a hot tropical country. They expected that no one was looking for them in this country, and they had no intention of going back. Here they already had their residency permits ready for them and had rented them a nice villa on the coast. A nice villa on the coast had been rented in the name of a front man. We'd sit tight for a while until things settled down, and then we'd head for the islands. It's even quieter there, said Jenna Ethan, happy to finally be rid of her precious friend in one way or another. Well, and in general, from everything that surrounded her for many years, annoying and not allow a normal life. Now she was settling in well, even fine, and she was going to enjoy the well-being she deserved. And Lisa was spotless in James' apartment. She was sitting in her stroller, motionless, her eyes red with tears, staring without seeing what she was looking at. A thought beat insistently in her brain. But Lisa would not let it go. Her inner voice told her not to think about it, or it would hurt too much. In the evening, she perked up, remembering her pills as the intrusive thought became quite unbearable. And now it threatened to burst forth with some disastrous conclusion. James called to Lisa in a weak voice. In the room peeked a boy about 12 years old. "Do you want your father?" and disappeared. After 2 minutes, the summoned himself came up. "How are you, Lisa?" "I'm fine. I need my pills in the bag." "And how long have you been drinking those?" In James's voice, who had become a packet, there were notes of anxiety and even anger. "Who prescribed them to you?" "Some doctor I know," shrugged at Lisa. "She brought them and said they were good for anxiety and worry." "You know, I slept very badly all the time after the event. And worried. Just panic was punishing. And when you started drinking them, everything just disappeared. At first I took one at night, and now I'm taking it again. So many things happened. I have to take them 2 or 3 times a day now. But that's okay. Jenna brought me plenty. Jenna brought me a whole box." James repeated in a murderous tone and shook his head back and forth, making a face as if he'd learned something awful. Without saying a word, he left the room. "And the pills?" Lisa shouted. "You forgot to give me the pills." James appeared in the doorway again. "Forget about them, you hear. It's a drug. And you are already addicted to it." "What drug? What are you?" It was just soothing, loud, and excited, Lisa said, hurrying, making excuses again. But he wasn't listening to her anymore. He started calling somewhere, trying to figure something out, talking to someone. "Give me my pills and pills. Please, please, I am in so much pain. I feel so bad without them." Lisa screamed. When she got to the door, she held up the handle, and it turned out to be locked. "And you too." Lisa began to bang her head against the door in hysterics. You all conspired to ruin me. And you're in on it. I understand now. I understand how I hate you all. I hate you all." Screaming and shrieking with rage. "Don't think I'm so defenseless and stupid. No, I am not." In a wild outburst, she leaned her arms on the handrail of the stroller and stood up, pulled herself up and stood. Yes, she stood on her own, unaided, driven only by her violent, irresistible rage. That was the thought that had kept her awake for so long. Trapped in a narcotic fog, unable to form. Now, when the effect of the drug weakened, Lisa realized everything. But with all her soul, with all her being, she persistently sought only one thing: the pills that gave her oblivion and peace. After standing for a few seconds and looking at her lean, strange, and pale legs with blue veins, she suddenly cried out like a wounded wild bird and collapsed on the floor near the baby carriage. "Lisa." The door opened. "Lord, Lisa, are you up?" He shook her and laughed and cried himself. "You got up, you could, grabbed her without feeling. But you carried her in an armful to the bed, laid her down, there covered her with a blanket and shouted to my son Alex, 'I'll open the door. The doctor should be here now.'" James himself remained sitting beside Lisa the watchman, her unfaithful, painful sleep. An hour later she was back in the clinic, but not the one where she had been lying for months. It was a specialized addiction clinic, where she was to spend many difficult weeks. The luxurious villa was drowned in tropical greenery. The outdoor deck had a gorgeous view of the ocean bay, and everything around it breathed with peace. By the pool with its impeccably clear azure water lay open-mouthed with a summer lace hat on her face. A woman in a white swimsuit with a flawless athletic figure. Tanned to an even golden bronze color, in soft slippers a Vietnamese maid walked by and took away an empty martini bottle and 2 dirty glasses. And again all was quiet. But then I heard voices from the bandstand, and then footsteps, and someone said protesting, "What right do you have to break into a private house like that?" The voice someone answered in a foreign language. Another voice high, hurriedly, like the muttering of a bird, and sharp footsteps grew closer still. Jenna called out to someone very close to the sleeping woman. And again, "Jenna, wake up. What is it?" Awkwardly, she pulled her hat away from Jenna's face and looked at him with her sleep-deprived, cloudy eyes. "What's going on here? Who are all these people?" "Ethan, Jenna. Let's go." Out came a man who spoke the same language as the woman. "You need to come with us." "Why on earth would I do that?" Jenna was indignant. "Ethan, call the police." "Who let them in here?" "Those crazy jerks?" "Oh yes, let me introduce myself." The English-speaking man took off his summer hat with small holes in it. "Interpol Central Bureau." He nodded toward the crowd of wary Vietnamese and turned to Ethan. "All of this applies to you as well, Mr. Ethan." "No, no, no," shouted Jenna, jumping up. "You have no right. This is some kind of wild mistake. We are good people. What are we being accused of?" "You are right," the colonel nodded. "Quite right. I was a little distracted while I was looking at your beautiful villa, and I completely forgot to enumerate the acts you are accused of." So he began to curl his fingers on his hand. Attempted murder committed by an organized group by prior conspiracy with particular cruelty. Fraud. Intentional inducement of a person to abuse drugs. And then there's the little things. Document forgery. "I think we've had enough," he smiled. "So get dressed and follow me willingly and without any tricks. The villa is cordoned off, you understand." He spread his hands, and any resistance to the legitimate demands of the law enforcement agencies that my humble person here represents is completely useless. Jenna and Ethan looked at each other poisoned. Jenna managed to get a grip on herself, with a slight nod of her head. "Okay, give us a few minutes." "Of course," the colonel waved his hand broadly. "My men will escort you to the check room, or wherever you like." On the other side of Jenna, in a Russian city far away from these magical coasts, about 2 months after the recent events described above, 3 people of tall, athletic build, a man with brown eyes, another with an attentively serious face in a strict suit, carrying a briefcase, and a frail, slender young woman approached the gates of the detention center, showed their passports at the checkpoint. The man in the suits said something to the officer on duty, and they were let through the turntable. "Are you okay?" asked the brown-eyed man. "Sure you're ready?" "Yes," the one nodded. I'm fine. After walking through a maze of corridors of some posts from behind black doors, they found themselves in a small office, where at a simple desk sat a man in a gray suit with eyes so cold and hard that the sight of him made anyone feel uncomfortable. The man who came with the diplomat, however, was not confused. "Good afternoon. We are all here, as agreed." "Good." The man in the gray suit, almost without looking at them, handed over the papers. "Would you show the witnesses where to sign?" When the formalities were finished, 2 more women and a man in handcuffs were brought into the office. Both short-shaven and eyes lost, the escort brought them in, saluted, and stood at attention in the doorway. "You have 3 minutes to talk freely." Threw the man in gray in the direction of everyone gathered. "Then we'll start the confrontation." The man with the warm brown eyes lightly shook the hand of the frail blonde woman, and she swallowed frantically, finally daring to raise her eyes to those brought in handcuffs. "Ethan and Jenna." Her voice trembled. "Why are you doing this to me?" Jenna laughed deliberately, harshly, and insolently. "And you thought, my dear, that I would be your free servant all my life? That everything would be handed to you on a silver platter, and the whole world would love you forever, just like Daddy and Mommy? Ooh, I hate you and people like you. She gracefully spat in the direction of the fragile woman, standing with dilated eyes, but hit the edge of the table gray with steel eyes man. He turned his heavy gaze on her, and she fell silent. And her angry rage faded. "So I see we may begin the interrogation," the man stated. The man in the gray suit took out a paper napkin, squeamishly wiped off the spit, and threw it in the trash can. Then he opened a thick cardboard folder on his desk and turned to the visitors. "If you would be so kind as to state your names, first names, patronymics." 3.5 weeks after this first meeting in the detention center, Jenna, accused of all the crimes mentioned by the Interpol colonel, hanged herself in her cell, using her new pantyhose for this purpose. Her accomplice, Lisa's ex-husband, went completely insane and dutifully endured all that fate had justifiably sentenced him to. At the trial, he repented of everything, admitted guilt. He tearfully apologized to Lisa, swore that he realized everything, and made a disgusting impression on everyone. Without a free and broken man, he was given the maximum, as requested by the prosecutor. And a few years later, he died quietly in some colony from tuberculosis, complicated by pneumonia. Lisa became very close to the tycoon and his son, as well as their elderly grandmother. A couple of years ago, I lost my mother and Lisa, who, long after all she had been through, could not trust anyone. Far from immediately reciprocating to James' advances, "You must be a very good man," she told him sadly. "That is, you will turn out to be good to me. But I am incapable now of knowing who is who and trusting you, and I am not worthy of you. I am not even worthy of myself. Yes, I don't mind. I'm just an idiot who can't see what's going on under her nose, and I'm completely clueless about people. That's okay," he consoled her. "But she's the bravest, toughest person I know." "Yeah," she grinned, "come on. It was all your own idea." It took 3 whole years to rehabilitate Lisa psychologically. And all that time James was there, always ready to help. And one late summer evening, sitting on the veranda of her returned dacha and looking thoughtfully at the lantern, which the silly moths were beating about, burning with their indefatigable and impossible pursuit, she said quietly to the tycoon sitting beside her, "You know, I will never go out again. I will never marry and have children either. You know that, don't you?" Of course, Lisa grinned bitterly. "So?" he asked, smiling, and gently took her hand. "I do not need a stamp in my passport, and I have a son too. Then why do you need me?" Liza looked up at him with her suffering, sad eyes, but suddenly he saw something new in them. "Why?" she repeated insistently. "To love you," he answered gently, "just to love you, that's all." "Is that enough?" Her lips trembled and tears welled up in her eyes. "It's enough for me." Slowly, so as not to frighten or scare her, he moved closer to her. "I love you, Lisa. I just love you. That is enough for me. Even if I can't love you the same way. We will not measure the amount of our love." He finally put his arms around her and held her close to him. "I'm sure that on the whole we'll definitely have enough." James cried, "Lisa, I don't deserve this. But everybody, stop tearing up. I'm not going anywhere else. You hear me?" he told her firmly. "You're not driving me away anymore." Lisa was true to her word. She never married him. It suited them both just fine. To this day, the two live together at the old academic dacha. Lisa has been painting since her injury. According to the unanimous opinion of the critics, there is something new and appealing in her paintings. A depth of mystery, an unspoken pain. They are willingly purchased by wealthy people and connoisseurs of contemporary art. And several times a year, Lisa has solo exhibitions in different cities around the world. James continues to work with his broken patients, trying to find his own approach to everyone. And he tells everyone the incredible, almost impossible story of healing one small and fragile, but so strong and pure of heart woman, that fate itself retreated before her, at first preparing a completely different, quite tragic and cruel ending for her.